Okay, so now for unit 4, the normal distribution, to begin with, we're going to review our variance and standard deviation. When I say review, that means it's nothing new. However, I'm going to expand it. I'm going to use a bigger list. I know before, I'll give you guys a list of like about 5 numbers or sometimes around 7 or 8. So it wasn't that much of a list. You know, there were that you didn't have that many numbers. Now we're going to increase it to a bigger list. I'm going to start first with a small list because there's something. I remember when we talked about it last time, when we use Excel to find the variance and standard deviation, I told you there are some formulas that I didn't want to mention then because you were learning it, variance and standard deviation, you were learning it. And I was like, I don't want to confuse you. So I'm not going to mention some formulas and I'm going to teach those formulas today. Okay, so here for the first example, we're going to calculate the variance and standard deviation for the following sample. Okay, very, very important thing that I know that this is a sample. Okay, and then I have a list of numbers. I have to find the variance, round to 2 decimal places as needed, and I need to find the standard deviation, round to 1 decimal place as needed. Okay, for this case, I'm going to use Excel. So let me open a page in Excel. I'm going to use the numbers from our list. So our numbers are 110 to Ford, 110 Ford, 2, 93, 60, 1, 7, 20, and 6. Again, these are just the numbers from the list, right? These are the numbers that I have. I happen to have 9 numbers on this list. Make sure you copy the numbers correctly. And then first thing we need to do is find the average of these numbers. Now I'm just going to go equals. I'm going to choose here on the A12 cell, I'm going to start equals because every time I want Excel to be a calculator, I start with equals and I'm just going to do average, open parentheses. I'm going to highlight. Use your mouse to highlight. The way I do this, I press on the beginning, I press and hold, and then I drag it. So it gives me this list. Or you can just say from A1 to A9. Notice how it uses colon. I close my parentheses and I press equal. For average, what it did is added all the numbers and divided by 9 because there were 9 numbers. Okay. And then the first thing I'm going to do on my row B, I'm going to do the how off is each number from the average. So I'm gonna go equals this first number minus the average. So A1 minus A12. However, I want each of these numbers to subtract the average. So when there is one number in particular you want to lock it, I'm gonna go here in between the A and the 12. So I'm gonna do a beginning of 12. I'm gonna include a money sign. By that, I'm basically telling Excel that is going to be each numbered minus the average, minus the A12. I'm locking it in at A12. So every time I'm going to subtract the same number from each, or I'm going to add the number from each. Every time you're going to use the same number, you can lock it using the money sign. Okay, so I locked it. Might be like, what do you mean with locking it? Look, I'm going to show you. I drag all these. And look, this next number you can see up here is A2 minus A12. Yeah, it's 4 minus the average. If I go down, A3 minus A12, the cell A4 minus A12. You see how I locked A12 for each of these? A12, remember, is our average. Cool. So I found what was the deviation on each of them. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go equals right here on C1. I'm going to go equals because I'm going to use a calculator and I want this number times itself and press equals. Now I'm going to click on this cell that I just copied right here at the bottom. I'm going to click and hold and I'm going to drag it. And look, it filled everything in. Just for us to check on our formulas, this is B1 times B1, B2 times B2, B3 times B3, B4. See? Instead of me typing the numbers on each, it calculated. So nice. Now I found how off on the row B, on the column B, I see how off each of my numbers is from the average. Now here is the variance or the deviation squared. Okay. So now here I'm gonna write sum because I wanna do equals sum, open parentheses, and I'm gonna add all these numbers. Now here at the bottom, I'm gonna find the variance, and then I'm gonna do STDEV for standard deviation. Now remember, for the variance, I added all these numbers, right? That's the sum. For the variance, I'm gonna go equals this sum divided by, okay, now the number I divide is either I divide by 9 or I divide by 8. Very, very important. All right, there's 9 numbers. If I'm doing the variance of a population, then I divide by 9 because there's 9 numbers. But in this case, because I'm doing the variance of the sample, I'm going to divide by 8. There's 9 numbers, so I divide by 1 less. So if there were 20 numbers, I would have divided by 19, right? The number I divide by, if it is the population, divide by how many numbers there are. If you're doing the variance of a sample, you divide by 1 less how many numbers there are because there's 9, so I divided by 8. So my variance, we can see, is going to be 1,831.75. Good. Now my standard deviation, I'm going to go equals SQRT for square root, open parentheses, and I'm going to click right here on this variance. Close my parentheses, press enter. It's 42.79895. But I know I have to round it to 1 decimal place. So I'm going to call that 42.8, right? We know how to round numbers. So remember, variance is going to be 1,831.75. I have to round it to 2 decimal places, and my standard deviation is going to be 42.8. Okay, so let me come back to my notes. Let's see here. My variance is going to be 1,831.75. And as a reminder, some of you might ask me, Leonzo, do I have to write the comma for 1,000? Keep in mind, everything's all together. I have no spaces, right? And then also don't add extra spaces after the number. Some people tend to, I don't know why, but every time they type a number, boom, they press the space bar and add an extra space. Don't do that. Otherwise, your homework is going to be marked incorrectly. Canvas thinks it's a different number, so don't add spaces at the end. Now, coming back, some people might ask me, do I have to type in the comma? No, you don't. If you do, great. The Canvas is going to read 1,831.75. If you don't add the comma, Canvas will still recognize it. So the comma is optional. If you write it or not is your choice. Now for the standard deviation, we had said it was going to be 42.8. Okay. So not that bad, not that bad. It's still, we're looking at variance and standard deviation, but I'm showing you guys formulas now, how to use this a little bit faster. Let's take a look at our next example. We're going to calculate the variance and standard deviation. So we're going to be looking at the same. I see I'm going to have a list, but it says for the following population. Okay, important thing. Our variance, we're going to run it to 2 decimal places, and standard deviation, we're going to run it to 1 decimal place. So let me go back to Excel. I'm going to erase everything. Okay, so my list, I'm going to write my numbers. Are going to be 6, -1, 4, 8, 1, 3, 3, 4, and 8. Good, I wrote my numbers. So I'm going to do average. I highlight my numbers. I'm gonna go here. This is gonna be equal 6 minus the average. And then I go here, then I'm all like, oh, I wanna lock the 12. Because I want all of these to do the same average. Now, some of you might be asking, Mr. Leonzo, what if I forget the money sign? Okay, let me show you. Let me show you exactly what happens. Let's say you come over and you just write A1 minus A12. And then we, oops, but I just go A1 minus A12. And you don't do the money sign, right? You just grab this and you drag it. You're like, gives me some numbers. Interesting is pretty much the next number. Let me highlight on one of these. Look, it's doing 3 minus A17. A17 is blank, so it recognizes as 0. So it's not doing, for all of this, let me highlight another one, it's not doing the number minus the average. That's why I lock it in. So let me raise this. I'm like, okay, make sure you lock it in. A12, you put the money sign. Now I'm doing that. Okay, now I have to go here. B1 times B1. And then I'm going to do the sum. Oops, I'm just going to write sum. But here I go equals sum, open parentheses. And I'm going to tell it add all these numbers. Here at the bottom, I'm going to do variance. And here I'm going to do standard deviation. I like to label things. So for my variance, I go this number, the sum of them, divided by 9. This time, because I'm doing the population, I divided by how many numbers I added. So I'm going to divide it by 9. In this case, my variance is going to be 8. For standard deviation, I'm going to go equals SQRT for square root, open parentheses, and 8. And I know I have to do one decimal place. I'm going to call that 2.8. So my variance is going to be 8, and my standard deviation is going to be 2.8. Okay, so I'm good. Let me come back to my notes. We said the variance was going to be 8, and standard deviation we said is 2.8. Okay, some of you might say, wait a minute, variance, it says round to 2 decimal places as needed. Yeah, I don't need to round this case. 8 is a whole number. That's why I include as needed. So if it's a long decimal, do round it. Do round it to 2 decimal places. In this case, I don't need to round. Okay, not that bad. So now let's take a look at another example here. A study was done of honey as a remedy for coughing. Yeah, honey does help for coughing. The coughing improvement scores as determined by the children's parent for the patients in the over-the-counter cough medicine dosage DM group, honey dosage group, and control group are reproduced in a accompanying table. Okay, so this table, what does this mean? This list, these numbers represent the scores, the improvement scores for those kids that took honey. This second list, it shows the improvement scores for those kids that took the medicine over the counter. And the control group is the group that didn't receive anything. This is the improvement scores of those kids that didn't receive anything. So now there's 3 different lists. So now here, I'm going to read the instructions. Find the standard deviation of the improvement scores for the DM dosage group. That means I'm talking about these kids, the DM dosage. So find the standard deviation and then round to 3 decimal places as needed. Okay. So this is the list that I'm focused, the DM dosage. Okay, so now let's go over to Excel. I'm going to erase everything. So the list, it's 12, 12, 11, 13, 6, 5, 11, 9, 4, 8, 9, 7, 13, 7, 6, 7, 9, 5, 11, and 5. Okay, now it's a big list. Okay, now let me find my average. I'm gonna go equals average question mark. Parentheses, close parentheses. So the average is 8.5. So I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go equals this number. So A1 minus the average, which is 823. I'm gonna use the money sign on the 23, right? I wanna lock it in. So then I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna double check. I'm gonna open one, I highlight it, and it says A11, which is 9 minus the average. Okay, so good. It worked. And then I have to go here. I have to go this number times itself. I'm gonna do my sum, my variance, and my standard deviation. Okay. So sum, I'm gonna add all these numbers. My variance is gonna be this number divided by, Now my question is, do I divide it by 20 or do I divide it by 19? Remember, this was a group of people that was experimenting. Let me show you guys something really quick. Find the standard deviation of the improvement scores for the DM dosage group. Right? This is just a group. This is just a sample. Right? There's more kids than these 20. So this is just a sample. I'm going to find the standard deviation and variance of a sample. So that means I have to divide by 19. It is a sample. Okay. So the variance is going to be about 8.473684. The variance. But standard deviation, I'm going to go equals SQRT, open parentheses, variance, close parentheses, and it's about 2.911. I'm going to run this to 3 decimal places. The question, it is only asking me for the standard deviation. But in order for me to find the standard deviation, I need to find the variance. So yes, find the variance and then find the standard deviation. So 2.911. Okay, so 2.911. That was it. Want you guys to practice your standard deviation. Want you guys to practice using the formula. Okay, that way you don't have to type in things over and over and over. This is just a review of variance and standard deviation. Again, nothing new. I just want you guys to be able to practice with the formulas.